Podcast. I'm Lisa Smith, and today we're doing the second part of a two-part series with Dr. Joe Nieusma. Dr. Joe is a senior toxicologist. He is the founder of Superior Toxicology and Wellness. He has 37 years in toxicology, and he specializes in human exposure to things that they shouldn't be exposed to: drugs, toxins, chemicals, biologicals, all of that. So, we're following up from last week's conversation. I'm excited to be talking with you again, Dr. Joe. Thanks for coming back.
Oh, thanks for having me back. We touched on so many 30,000 foot overviews that sometimes you just got to drill down and talk more in detail about fewer things. It's like the education process. When you get a bachelor's degree, you know a whole or a little bit about a whole lot. And then when you get a master's degree, you know a little bit less about a little bit less. And then when you get a PhD, you know a whole lot about nothing. That goes, right?
That's
Might as
right.
well share my nothing.
That explains a lot of college professors I've had. Now it makes sense, finally.
Yeah,
Yes.
most people say PhD stands for post-hole digger. Mine stands for prefers half days.
Love it. Well, I do appreciate you. And we talked a lot, different exposures that we have, especially in the world we live today, and about the two-prong approach to how to help the body get rid of the stuff that shouldn't be there and then reinforce the stuff that should be so we live our healthiest lives, we age, we don't prematurely age.
Essentially, what you're doing there, Lisa, is you're tipping the equation to more helpful things going on and less harmful things going on. And we talked a lot about inflammation, but inflammation is a good thing and inflammation is a bad thing.
Mm,
It's a good thing because inflammation is how the body heals. It has to tear down what's wrong before it can rebuild what's right. And it's just one of those things where inflammation and reactive oxygen species is how the immune system kills viruses and bacteria.
mhm,
It's like when you have a fever, you're raising the temperature to kill those microbes too. So taking your ibuprofen and knocking your fever down is actually hindering your body to get rid of those toxins.
mhm.
But the inflammation is part of the healing process of your immune system. Now, back in the glory days of the pandemic, it was mentioned as part of the mechanism of toxicity for the jab,
Mhm.
cytokine storm. Remember that phrase?
For sure. Yeah.
Cytokine storm is inflammation run amok. So inflammation is critical, but you also need the antioxidative part of it to keep the immune system on track,
Mm,
to keep that cytokine storm from building, to keep that overload of cellular communication molecules from calling in the nuclear war, if you will. The cavalry is good enough. We don't need the nuclear war. And it's only shades of gray between good inflammation and doing what it needs to be and staying in control, then flipping that track, going on the wrong track, and instituting cytokine storm and really bad stuff down this pathway.
that's a great illustration. Everyone knows cytokine storm. As humans, we tend to label things pretty binary: good, bad, cytokine storm, bad, right? But you bring in the nuance of cytokine storm may be the nuclear bomb.
Yep. And remember, at that point in time, your body is thinking it's fighting for its life.
Yeah.
I got a couple great stories of being expert witnesses in cases of trauma where that comes into play. A case out of Denver where it was a Monday night football game, and a guy at the end of the game fell down 3 flights of stairs down a chase and had massive trauma and ended up dying.
Oh, wow.
And the stadium district and the football team didn't want to pay the widow who had 5 children under 12 homeschooled. And they hired a toxicologist in the case who looked at the blood alcohol content and said, oh, yeah, he was drunk as a skunk. Did the back calculation standard stuff and wrote it off saying, no, he was drunk. And the plaintiff side hired me. I looked at the case and said, well, he was actually probably sober when he tripped over the railing and went down and fell to his death. And that was based on deposition testimony. He was a season ticket holder. His same group of friends went to all these games. They drank at the tailgate party and not much in the game because it would cost them a fortune. They had this down to a science. And so the calculations that I ran based on testimony says that he had very little to no alcohol in his system and that it was probably a complete accident. And they took my testimony along with testimony of a construction defect on the steps and the railing, safety railing being too low, and they turned that into a win for the plaintiff. But the key element was there's no precedent in the literature for what happens under trauma when all of your extracellular fluid comes gushing back into your bloodstream to maintain volume. He was bleeding and losing volume, and his organs were on save our life and pulling all of the fluid from the body, the intracellular fluid, which is where your alcohol goes when it's metabolized. So it pulls it right back in, and they do a blood sample in the ER, and of course it's going to have all kinds of alcohol in it because there was alcohol there before, but it's not in his blood when he fell off the steps.
Oh,
And
that's
there's
so
no
interesting.
precedent. And I've also used the same argument to help families get insurance companies to pay in life insurance denials. Like single car accidents, there was a guy who was a known alcoholic who hit a tree, and in the trauma of trying to maintain life, everything went right back in. The blood alcohol level got high, and the testimony said that they hadn't been drinking. They were cleaning fish till midnight, and he was driving home late, fell asleep, missed a curve. Apparently, the denials are fast and furious when blood alcohol level number is too high. But that's how myself as a toxicologist have helped victims get a beneficial ruling in a major court case and in insurance denials based on thinking outside the box. And
Mhm.
if you have a toxicologist that's just right on track, right down the middle, yes, this is how we always do it. We look at these, we do this calculation, and this is how many drinks they had.
Mhm.
Doesn't always work that way, especially when trauma is involved, because there is this mechanism of your body maintaining blood volume to feed your heart, lungs, and brain.
That's interesting.
The human body is just a bunch of different types of reservoirs with different chemical characteristics. You
Oh,
got your adipose tissue, which is a fancy science word for fat. Everybody has it.
yeah.
And you have different muscle layers. You have your GI tract, which you are an expert on that. You know that there's chemical characteristics which drive xenobiotics, that fancy science word for stuff that shouldn't be in your body, that's in your body, to different reservoirs. I
Yeah.
had another client that I helped under Dr. Joe for Hope that was on I don't remember the name of the drug. It was used for smoking cessation and it was an antidepressant. And he was on it and he wasn't getting better. So his doctors bumped the dose, bumped the dose, bumped the dose. Well, guess what? There was bioaccumulation. The man was so saturated, I think it was bupropion, with this drug product that he couldn't function. He was literally shutting down function. So when I said, hey, you need to get off of this drug, they cut him off of that drug. Not only did he get his life back, but he got a significant increase in quality of life. He probably lived another 20 years. It's all because the doctor was just boosting the dose. Why isn't this working? Higher dose, without looking at all of the things that could happen with these drug products. And he was killing his patient. And
Okay.
remember what we talked about on the last program briefly, the ADME, absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. For
Yes.
every human, that's an individual process. It's not the same. That's why when they do these drug studies in the drug development study, they got to get it into a lot of people to get trends. They
Yeah.
aren't exact numbers. It's just how most people react.
Yeah.
And everybody's different. Let's say when you have a headache, do you take one ibuprofen, two ibuprofen, three ibuprofen, or four ibuprofen?
Right.
Because that tells you how sensitive they are to drug products.
And you know people who've said, I can't take anything. Oh,
That's right.
sensitive. And I have even found in when I work with people, those people, they react even to the mildest supplement.
And what is that reaction? If it's allergic, it's going to be mediated through histamine release and mast cells in your immune system. If it's regular, it's probably going to be inflammation.
Good point.
The first thing I look for in any new condition someone tells me they have is it related to inflammation?
And it always is. Like
Yeah. And it's all inflammation based. When you
It
really
is.
look at it, all inflammation based. So one
It
of
is.
the keys is always going to be getting in front of your inflammation. And in the last show we talked about the C60. That's one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah.
But you asked me one of those questions about that, toxicology is built on the dose. Dose makes the poison. And we talked about hormesis, which is long-term low exposure. I came up with a couple other great examples. Camp Lejeune's a Marine base in North Carolina that had contaminated groundwater issues. And I believe the chemical was trichloroethylene, TCE, right? It's just a solvent.
Mhm.
But our family lived there during that time in the early 70s. So my brother, who was a Marine, and my sister, who had reproductive issues as well as her Lyme disease, they both put into this pool of, hey, we were affected by this. And of course, my dad, he ultimately died of a lung condition, which could have been due to some tie to that, but he was also a dentist and an oral surgeon and was in labs and had silica exposure, just all kinds of things that could have contributed. And it's a complex case.
Mhm.
But low dose exposure to something like that in your water can result in these insidious conditions that come up over time. It sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
You don't notice it right away, but over time you're like, oh, wait, where did this come from? So another example is glyphosate, and that's
Wow.
that's a real world example right now. That's the active ingredient in Roundup. The Roundup was, I don't remember the parent company, but Bayer bought it.
Yeah, it was Monsanto.
Monsanto, there you go, Monsanto. And Bayer bought this product knowing there's just all kinds of pending litigation against it. And having grown up in the pharmaceutical industry, I can tell you this. Every single tablet and capsule that is sold, a portion of that sales money goes into a litigation fund. I guarantee you the chemical industry is the exact same way
Has to be.
because they plan to get sued and they plan to settle and they plan the budget for all of these lawyer games.
Mm.
And otherwise, Bayer would have never bought Monsanto's product, glyphosate. And they have said that you can go to a grocery store and pull like Cheerios
Mm.
in the oats, and you can find glyphosate in that box of stuff you feed your kids.
Dr. Joe, there's a research study that looked at levels of glyphosate in our food, Americans' food. Cheerios were off the charts.
Mhm. I
The
haven't read that
oats,
study, so tell me what other foods were in it.
my gosh, yeah, oats were huge. I'd have to go back. It was a handful of years ago.
It's
Maybe
all processed stuff too, isn't it?
it's all processed stuff. But you think about oats, this gets under my skin so much. The foods that the government tells us are the most healthy foods, oatmeal to reduce your cholesterol, pushing statins in oatmeal for your cholesterol. Well, we know we can talk
Don't
about,
ever take statins.
yeah, exactly. We can go down that path next. But oatmeal, the oats in our country are loaded way off. There's a safe limit, and I don't remember the numbers. I'll find that study, I'll send it to you. I'll link it in the show notes too.
Perfect.
But in the oats, it's really,
All of the gluten thing. How much of the gluten intolerance is due to the inflammation and other toxic effects of the small dose of glyphosate that they're getting?
I can tell you personally, I have a gluten intolerance that is severe. I ate so many whole grains before this. I've been off gluten now for years, but I can't even ever add it back because we talked about the immune system yesterday, the adaptive immune system, and my army against gluten is immediate. As soon as it crosses my lips, I can't even touch it. I believe it's related to years and years of eating glyphosate laced gluten because the gluten bread and pasta, that was all my thing. It is something to think about. And honestly, when you see these foods, they would finish off after they harvested wheat, they would finish it with glyphosate to stop the ripening process.
Yeah,
So, all of us who love our whole grains, and we're told to eat whole grains, we're eating Roundup. And so
yeah.
I do believe that had a lot to do with poking all kinds of holes in my
And I also heard that they spray those crops to prevent microbial growth contamination.
right.
There's a better way to do that. There's a compound that's on the market that has been used and it's licensed for it to, it's great in long-term storage of apples and it's been shown to decrease listeria in melons after harvest. And it's been used in the protein markets in chicken processing dips and everything. And that is chlorine dioxide. Chlorine
Oh,
dioxide is so good at killing those bacterias and foodborne bacterias. And the best part about chlorine dioxide is that UV light breaks it down. So you put it in the warehouse where your massive load of crops are being stored, you kill the microbial growth, therefore increasing your shelf life. But then when it hits the sunlight, if there is any chlorine dioxide gas left,
it
it's
breaks it
broken
down.
down very quickly in UV light. It's effective in its removal. You don't have residual levels in your foodstuffs. I don't know why they don't use it more.
There's a bigger connection there. That's
Yeah,
why.
so the decoder ring translation on that phrase is
Yeah.
follow the money.
Follow the money and the power. Now they're doing that with oats. And oats
Yeah.
are the thing that gluten-free people go to. They go to oats now. Now it has to be organic.
Everything gets demonized at different times. Our environment, what we eat, what we breathe, what we drink, what we take, all of that stuff, and it's tipping the balance in the wrong direction. These bad bacteria are growing and forming these plaques. They tell you to take statins to attack a certain amount of bacteria based on the science. The statins will get after the specific enzyme which converts a specific thing to a specific different thing.
Mhm.
But the statins, while it's very good at doing what it does, has an enormous list of side effects. The most important of which is that it kills or attacks most people's livers.
Mm.
And what you can do with diet and exercise, in my opinion, is never worth a statin. If your doctor says, well, you're pre high cholesterol and I want to put you on a statin, you should immediately say, wait, doc, give me 60 days.
Yeah.
Let me change my diet, let me change my exercise, and let's see what we can do with my efforts alone before we put me on the death drug, which puts me on a liver transplant list at worst case scenario. Does it happen to everybody? No. But do you know if it will happen to you? No.
Have you seen the research that it also now has been related to dementia, statin use? And because
Really?
the brain is made up of so much fat and cholesterol, we're learning, has a protective measure in the body. It is made by the body
Yeah.
intentionally.
If somebody were to have some way to get an oxidative therapy that attacks bad bacteria that's not supposed to be there on a regular, everyday basis, just to give your body a boost in the right direction, they're going to be a lot better off. So
Right.
as you take out things that aren't supposed to be there,
Mhm.
that suck resources from good living, you're also going to see effects on cholesterol numbers and atherosclerosis, and that I know it has effects on dementia and Alzheimer's. It's all tied together because physiology, like toxicology, is a whole picture approach. We're not one process, we're billions of processes weaved together that work in tandem.
To your point, when we have gut dysbiosis, it could all go back. We can take all roads lead back to the gut, to Rome.
Yeah,
We know candida, elevations in H. pylori, parasites, molds, heavy metals, all are toxins we want out of the body.
those are
So,
the bad things that suck resources,
exactly. It's very interesting. We need a lot of faith either way we go. We either need faith that our body is meant to do what it's supposed to do,
which
or
it is.
faith in doctors who say, no, no, take this drug. But I think most of us have come to the conclusion, especially in the past decade, that all those things you keep telling me to take, we're going to take this right into polypharmacy. All these things you tell me, I'm starting to doubt that they're as beneficial as you say because nothing lives in a vacuum. So, yes, maybe they get rid of my symptoms, high cholesterol in the statin example, but they don't live in a vacuum. So, they're doing all these other side effects, deleterious side effects. So you
Yeah.
help people to eliminate these unnecessary medications.
I target statins and I target antidepressants. Most of the world is on Prozac and it's ridiculous.
Okay, yeah. Tell me why.
When or how did the populace get so dependent on popping a pill?
I think it's a complicated answer.
Very much so.
I've worked with so many people, and here's my theory. If you're in the rapids, put on the life jacket. If you realize you're stuck and you're like, I don't know how to get out of this, I'm overwhelmed, then put on the life jacket. There's no shame, there's no judgment. Realize then what is it that I can do to help myself get out of the rapids down the road so that I'm not stuck on something forever that might be having effects that I don't want long term?
And getting off of polypharmacy is not an overnight thing. There's a
Yeah.
lot of these drug products. If you quit them cold turkey, they're going to cause more harm than
Yes.
good.
Exactly. So I do advocate for people, listen, you got to do what you got to do. And if that's going to help you get over to the other side and give you some capacity to now, okay, how am I going to change? What do I need to change in my lifestyle, in my
And
mindset, in my stress, in my relationship?
that's a tough one. You got to cut back on those slow and you got to get back to being yourself. And the one thing that I try to always tell people that, especially when I'm trying to get them off of polypharmacy, is look, the most important tool in your toolbox is the 6 inches between your ears.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you need to take stock of where you are if you're going to have any hope of knowing where you're going.
That's right. I just had this conversation with my daughter. She was stressed, and I said, let's talk about that. Depression is hopelessness, and anxiety is helplessness. And depression tends to look backward, like in the past, and then this makes me feel hopeless about going forward. Anxiety looks to the forward, what if, what if, what if, and I feel helpless. So if we can come to right now, where are we? Are we okay right now? Now let's look at the future, and we want to position ourselves now for the best options. What do we want there? So now we reverse engineer, and a lot of it does come down to recognizing where we are right now, accepting it with love, especially we tend to judge ourselves really harshly. Yeah, accepting it and being like, I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay that I don't feel the way I want to feel right now. I'm going to do whatever I can to give myself a solid foundation. And I'm going
That's a very important first step you just mentioned there is knowing that you don't like how you are right now, but being okay with it. I
to
mean,
accept.
that's step one, because then you can set up the baby steps to create a path forward to where you want to be. And that path forward will be wrought with failures where you're back to square one and you're taking step one over and over and over until you've mastered step one and you can move to step two. But you have
Yeah.
to recognize it. Like you said, the cortisol in the stress of your anxiety and your depression is wreaking havoc the whole time. You feel good mentally, you don't feel good physically, and that's tough.
When we judge ourselves, then we spiral into hopelessness and helplessness
Mhm.
because if we're not in our own foxhole, it doesn't matter who else is in there. We got to be there first, which means we got to be kind to ourselves first and go, "Okay, I'm taking an accurate accounting of where I am right now. I'm okay. This is just part of my journey. I love who I am. I trust who I am. I trust also we can look down the road and say, okay, I'm in this situation right now. Even if like we're not talking about SSRIs, say we're talking about PPIs, right? What I have seen as the most common health complaints tend to be anxiety, lots of gut problems,
Points right back at the gut issues. One of your questions was, what's one exposure the wellness world is obsessing over and one exposure that we're underestimating? I think both of these things tie into gut issues and all of the different small exposures which gang up on our guts, the microplastics and the hormonal agents and the dyslipidemic drugs in the water. I read a study on the Children's Health Defense newsletter just the other day that smog is now related to memory loss. Smog exposure in your 20s is related to memory loss later on in life.
Yeah.
That's a long-term effect of a short-term exposure. Huge.
Interesting.
But
Yeah.
something the world's obsessing over that I think is kind of overstated, nanoparticles.
Tell me why.
It's
Problem.
the same thing we've dealt with, just smaller. The
Okay.
body can handle a lot of that burden in its absorption, in its distribution, in its metabolism, and its excretion.
Okay.
Those parameters will be different than their full-size counterparts, but they're still there. You got to do the science, you got to get the data so you know what that difference is. Because if something's smaller, it goes deeper, it stays longer, and it takes longer to get rid of. So, what
Right.
does that mean? You need to put less of it in. It's a pharmacokinetic question. It goes to where it goes, is what it does.
Interesting.
And if we overburden those pathways of exposure, ramp up the dose, that increased dose could create more of a poison. And the
Yeah.
second half of that is it's really hard to predict. One exposure we're underestimating because that's the crux of everything that was the saving chemical of today turns into the toxic chemical of a decade from now. That's your DDT, that's your Agent Orange, That's your dioxins and your insulators of your electric industry. I mean, that's your Roundup.
Yep, exactly. That was so all of those chemicals you mentioned are Monsanto.
That's your genetically modified organisms. I mean, there's some really bad evidence that, I mean, they should just stop that.
Oh, definitely. There's so much evidence. And the argument for GMOs, genetically modified organisms, is this is the science. These are the scientists who defend it. They say, oh, we know what it's going to do. We've tested it and it's going to be fine. You never know what it's going to do in science. You never know. You yourself said every process of metabolism and elimination.
You might know what the normal curve looks like, the first standard deviation away from the mean, but you
Yeah.
don't know what the second and third deviation away from the mean looks like. And
Mhm.
guess what? That's where your problems are.
Exactly. And you don't know what it is over time. We're talking about deviations as a point in time. We don't know what it is 10 years down the road,
That's
20,
right.
30.
And nobody, as much as they'd like to tell you, nobody has a crystal ball.
Well, listen, before we wrap up, I do want to talk about a toxic cocktail because you and I have definitely hit on polypharmacy through these two conversations and about how the sick get sicker because one medication causes these different symptoms, so you get on another, and
Mhm.
oh gosh, people are
Blood pressure drugs fit that description.
okay. So tell us how.
I see so many people that are on one, two, three, sometimes even four different mechanisms of blood pressure reducing drugs. And I ask them to question their doctors as to why. Is my blood pressure that bad that I need to have four different ways to lower it? I have a friend of mine who takes lisinopril or something, but when he takes carbon 60, he doesn't need his lisinopril.
Interesting.
He takes his blood pressure every single day, and it's one of those things that it takes care of his blood pressure. And I've got my brother-in-law, well, my wife is a twin, so her twin sister's husband is on borrowed time. He's already outlived every other male relative in his like his dad and his uncles, and he's got atrial fibrillation and blood pressure issues, and he has edema, so he has to take antidiuretics, and he wakes up every morning and says, "Thank God I got another day." But I wonder what his doctors, if they've ever even had a conversation with one another based on what he's on. One creates symptoms that needs to be treated by the next, which needs to be treated by the next.
Right.
And that's that toxic cocktail because you're doing the one thing you want one drug to do, but you're creating more issues.
Right.
Is there a better way to solve the problem? What's the root cause? Why is that
Exactly.
blood pressure high?
Exactly. And you know what he's told. We all know what he's told. Well, it's genetic.
Genetic, or you're too heavy, or some other BS line to sell a prescription.
Anecdotally, I have a friend who she had high blood pressure. She's otherwise completely healthy, functional medicine. She did all the things and she was on nitric oxide to help open the blood
Mhm.
vessels
Yeah.
more. She was doing all the right things, but still had some elevated blood pressure and was concerned about it. As an aside, did a food sensitivity test, not one of the IgG ones online, like a good one. My favorite looks at a different part of the immune system. But anyhow, she found that she had a sensitivity to eggs. And she was like, eggs, that's my main source of protein. Are you kidding? She got rid of her high blood pressure completely. She doesn't even take nitric oxide anymore. Got rid of her high blood pressure, got rid of the edema in her ankles completely from
Fabulous.
finding a food sensitivity where she was eating this thing every day that her body couldn't handle.
Yeah.
So there are root causes, and she was told it was genetic. And genetics, we know genetics load the gun. That is real.
Yeah.
But epigenetics pull the trigger. So if
Yes.
we can drill down and find the epigenetics, we can fix so much.
And classically trained Western physicians don't have the capability or the knowledge to do what you just described.
Exactly.
You need a functional medicine practitioner as part of your healthcare team that understands root cause analysis and doesn't subscribe to take this drug and mask this symptom.
In my practice, I was like, my goal is for you to fire me. That's my
Mhm.
goal. And then you come back to me once a year, twice a year, and we just check in and make sure
That
everything.
has to be the goal.
Here's the deal. There are always enough people who are going to need our services. Can
People
maybe,
are the only animal on the face of this earth that would intentionally do stuff to hurt themselves.
hmm. Hmm. When you put it that way, that's kind of poignant.
With autonomy and great thinking capabilities comes great responsibility and high risks.
Yeah, I don't think anyone knowingly is doing that, but definitely we unknowingly do that.
Well,
Mm.
smoking,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
voluntarily lining up to bare your shoulder for the,
That's a whole other episode.
maybe that'll be part three.
Part three. Yeah, we'll just do a deep dive into that. I know it's about time for us to wrap up, but I love that you came back today, Dr. Joe. Thank you for your wisdom,
If
for the,
somebody has more questions on anything that we actually touched on, you can get me at superiortoxicology.com. Send me an email, send me a text, give me a call. Leave me a message, I'll get back to you.
yes, and you and I talked about in our last episode, we talked about Epic water filters, and you emailed me back.
That's a
And
great water filter.
thank you. Well, my son did the research. He's a smart cookie, and he was like, "This is the one we want." And then he showed me the research. So yeah, but I attest to the fact that you got right back with me within the day and said, "Yeah, that's a great water filter." So just so everyone knows, Epic is a great water filter. And secondly, Dr. Joe does get right back with you when you're able. Okay, I'll have the links. Also, Dr. Joe for Hope, if you are on multiple medications and you do want someone to look at that because you feel like maybe that's not all necessary and you would like some professional guidance. I'll have all that in the show notes though. All right, my friend, thank you for coming back on today. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. I will be back next week. Until then, stay